For the troops that we had in Afghanistan in the years we were there, we had a huge impact as a nation. We had members on multiple tours, and as we all know, with any military conflict, there's injury and unfortunately loss of life to which we had our share. We had 158 members that came home wrapped in our nation's flag. On the morning of Easter Sunday, April 8th, 2007, just like the rest of the nation, I woke up to the news that our fallen count had just jumped up 6. And with several other members severely wounded when a patrol unit known as 22 Bravo ran across an improvised explosive device. As the names and the ranks and the pictures of the fallen started scrolling across the news screen, I nearly fell out of my wheelchair that morning as I was getting into it. I had recognized the cap badge of the 6 as one that I had worn myself for a short time. Master Corporal Christopher Stannix, at the age of 24, was now one of our fallen. Chris had become the first combat death the regiment had seen in several decades. He was welcomed home a hero. It was standing room only at both sides of the base chapel at CFB Stadacona on the day of his service, not far from where we are right now tonight. The retractable wall that could divide the chapel when needed was open to allow for the large crowd. The one side of the chapel was a sea of combat and dress greens. He was taken to his hometown of McAdams, New Brunswick, and laid to rest with honor shortly after. At the time, I had not known the personal sacrifices Chris took to go to Afghanistan to join so many others, leaving Canadian soil in the beginning of 2007, only to have him and 5 others come home 4 months later. There had been a movement afoot to start naming places after our Afghan fallen as a reminder of that blank military check that had been cashed. At one point, the junior rank mess at the Armies was named in Chris's honor. Those who frequent the junior rank mess will see this huge portrait of Chris on the far right wall as you walk in. Only those who serve and visit the armories on a regular basis would see this. In late July 2013, I saw an opportunity to recognize Chris that the public could see for many years. The Halifax Municipality had just announced they were looking for a name for a new ferry that was coming into service in the spring. The oldest of the ferry of the fleet at the fleet at the time was soon up for retirement. This would be the first ferry in the fleet since 1986. As I was sitting in front of my computer, reading the many online short-sighted and ignorant comments of others to what to name this ferry on the local media websites, after some thought for an honorable name, it hit me. Why not Chris? Why not? In the following days, in early August, I reached out to the regiment on our private social media feed and gave them a heads up about this situation. This was a 2-stage contest. There was a public input stage and a voting stage of the top 5 names. I did have a small level of expectation that those who served with Chris would think this was a great idea. I could not have imagined the avalanche I had just started. I soon started a Facebook page called Name the New Woodside Ferry, the Christopher Stannix. During the peak of this effort, the group page got flooded with stories of Chris's character on the job as a reservist and while he was off duty. This included the personal sacrifices that Chris had made to take the 6-month tasking. Heroes are sometimes defined by what they do in that moment of a crisis or battle. With what I had just now knew of Chris, he was a hero in my eyes long before he stepped onto the dusty grounds of Afghanistan. Chris willingly took a demotion to corporal to fill a position to go lower. This is not an easy decision for anybody who has served. He also took a 6 months off from his studies from St. Mary's University. The biggest personal sacrifice of them all, that he put his own wedding plans on hold until his return. He had planned to marry this young lady who was also an Army reservist and still is. He was possibly returned to the rank of Master Corporal on his return. Over the next several months, the news media picked up and reported stories on this effort on their own. One TV station each reached out to me a few times for stories and the effort on this naming campaign. Thanks to social media, the news of this effort even reached a high school classmate of Chris, a Crown attorney in Alberta at the time, and he spread the news. I was starting to see links to this naming campaign on both military forums and social media feeds alike. Even though this was an effort to recognize one of our fallen, my own nerves and anxiety were riding a roller coaster for months, not knowing how this would play out. Then the day came, January 13th, 2014. The Halifax Regional Municipality is making the announcement. My excitement was bursting at the seams. Christopher Stannix had won at 61% of the vote, with Vince Coleman coming in second at 12%. Even though I became the face of this effort, if it wasn't for the 12,000 plus who took a few minutes to vote, this effort would have been dead in the water. On that cloudless, clear morning of May 14th, 2014, a huge crowd of military, civilian, family, and friends alike gathered on Nathan Green Square on the Halifax waterfront near the ferry terminal. The christening of this newly named ferry was soon to start. This is where I met Chris's parents for the first time. I was just rolling around the corner of the ferry terminal when they saw me first. His father, Ken, came over and gave me this big, beefy handshake. And his mother, Kate, came over and gave me this big hug. This was all the thanks I needed. Of all the pictures that stood out, that were taken that day, there are two that stand out for me. The first picture shows a large contingency of the PLF Regiment in dress green standing on the upper open deck of the ferry, looking towards the square, posing for the media. The second picture shows Chris's parents and his fiancée applying a temporary dedication plaque on the internal wall of this new ferry. I take pause every now and then to think if I had not had my spinal cord injury in the fall of 1998, while on a training exercise, and the Canadian involvement in the Afghan conflict starting shortly after in 2001, but for the grace of God, go I. Remember, the next time you take a ride on one of our 5 new ferries, take a notice of the names. All are named after 5 average Nova Scotians who stood up to make a difference, even though they had not planned to do it. 2 of them are named after our Afghan fallen. Thank you.